Welcome back to Second Nature. We are joined today by Ben Coates from Canyon Bicycle. And this is going to be a great conversation in so many different ways because what Canyon has done is pretty incredible. Ben is leading the charge in North America, but also Ben came from a head mechanic role, really started on sort of the ground floor of the bike industry, and now is running one of the largest bike companies in America slash globally. So, Ben, welcome to Second Nature.
Oh, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
I think maybe we should start with the origin story. And I think a lot of people will probably take inspiration from this because we're all kind of looking for that way into the outdoor industry. How do I get to be involved with the sport that I love? And where do I start? And I think that's maybe a perfect place. Like, how did you get in the door of the bike industry? Where did it all begin?
Well, where it really all began was I was a skier, and through that I got into mountain biking, and I riding a mountain bike at the trails up above Boulder, and I had got clipless pedals and was really excited about it. And I tried to do a bunny hop over a stream, and I tacoed my front wheel on the bank of the stream. That was, like 6 inches. It was, it was true over the bars, wheel taco, hike out of the trail for an hour. And in college, no money. How do I fix this thing? And I had a friend of a friend who owned Cutting Edge Sports in Boulder, which is now the Trek store, and I just begged him for a job because I couldn't afford to fix my bike. And that's really the origin of how I got into it. I was a freshman in college, wanted to ride mountain bikes, and broke something. And then there's a guy who's still in the industry who I wish I caught up with more often, but there's a guy named Ariel Lindsley. I think he works for Fox. He was a professional mountain biker slash mechanic, and he was the driver slash mechanic for Subaru Gary Fisher. And he worked at the shop that I worked at. And I bothered him incessantly. How do you fix that? Can I watch you do this? Can you help me with my bike? Whatever. And he was just genuinely inclusive in his cycling nature and would ride with me and would teach me about bikes, and was really like the starting point for the passion of bringing people into cycling for me. And I, somewhere in college, was like, that sounds like a great gig. Like, I'm trying to race my bike. I was not very good at it, so that was never going to go anywhere. And so I really was trying to get into that. And that shop became a hotbed for kind of moving into cycling. Boulder at the time, 1999 to 2003, was really a domestic professional cycling scene in multiple ways. And um, I stumbled across a bunch of different people, and one of them offered me a job to drive a truck in exchange for being sponsored. And that guy's name's Brandon Dwight. He doesn't know it. Well, he does know it. He changed my life. Um, but I drove around to the Norbas, worst paying job ever, right? Like, I mean, I was gone for weeks at a time, and I made hotel and race entry fees, was what I got paid. Um, but that got me out in the Norba scene. And I had graduated from university, was planning to go to grad school, kind of was aimlessly just taking the summer to race my bike and whatever. And while I was out there, I met a person who was an independent pro, and she rode the same bikes we rode. So I started helping her and taking care of her and whatever. And that led to meeting her boyfriend, who was the general manager of the Subaru Fisher team. And long story short, that person, Tyler Pilger, who coincidentally married my wife and I, he convinced me as a college graduate in environmental population organismic biology to be a race mechanic, which I had no business doing. We were at a Mexican restaurant on East Colfax, and he was like, "I think you can do it. You like good to go." So I traded dreams of being a doctor for $18,500 a year and a free bike. My parents were psyched, and that was the start, you know. And it was, it was kind of heyday of mountain bikes at the tail end of it. Ryder Hestel, Roland Green, Chrissy Redden, Liam Colleen, Kerry Barnholt, JHK, Heather Ermiger, Willow Kerber, a lot of people in the mix. And because the general manager of the team for Fisher was also the Trek general manager, we kind of commingled. So I worked with all those athletes and learned, you know, traveling the world and, you know, dealing with how do you set up non-tubeless tires on a tubeless rim with tape and sealant and a floor pump in the middle of the night in the middle of Madrid. And kind of that got me into Trek. I did that job for a while. But I have another origin story, unfortunately, and I'm, slightly overcomplicating it, but I went back to graduate school because I was like, I I can't be a mechanic for my whole life. I didn't have real ambition specifically, but I had ambition to, kind of in general. And I looked around at the race mechanics who I super respect. And after a number of years, they got into a life cycle that like normal life doesn't, race mechanics don't live a normal life. You leave for 6 months and then you have 3 months off, or, like it's an odd way of living. So I knew I didn't want to do that. So I went back to school and I had convinced myself I wanted to make products. And so I went back to get a master's in mechanical engineering and best money I ever wasted. I went for one semester, went, man, I do not want to be an engineer. I'm not capable of this. I don't, and what I really want to be is an industrial designer, but I can't draw. So that's out of the question. Um, and I would say that like by first trimester, by first midterms, I was calling the head of product, Joe Vadabuncor, and the head of aftermarket product, John Balmer, like once a week. Come on, guys, give me a job. Just I'll do anything. Help me out. Um, and then that's when I took my full time work at Trek. I moved to Wisconsin as a entry level product manager, a coordinator of wear testing, a support system for Nike cycling, um, and that was kind of the start of a 15-year life there.
That's really incredible to think about how you kind of put yourself out there in the very beginning, basically working for free, doing what needed to be done and helping out however you could. And I'm sure those are some pretty lean years. But like you can't just walk in the door at Trek and just get a job. I think that the time that you put in, put you in the front row for that. And especially now, I feel like the way that resumes work at all these businesses, like just submitting your resume online appears to not work anymore for a lot of people that are trying to get jobs. And it is the fact that you had raised your hand and you had been useful and sort of proven your value to a lot of these people, and you had a direct line to decision makers on some level, that you had a better chance of getting in the door versus someone else that was like a semester into mechanical engineering. I've got to imagine that had a big impact on sort of the rest of your career.
Like anybody who has any level of success, luck plays a huge part in it, right? Like I can't take any credit for the luck, for the fact that Tyler thought that he found somebody that could do the job, and like that was lucky. The serendipity of meeting him, whatever. The luck paired with the grind. Like I think that one of the things that I have in my history was something that Professor Galloway talks about. If you're a Professor Galloway fan, like I have balance in my life in my 40s because I didn't in my 20s and 30s, and I traveled 300 days a year for the better part of 7 or 8 years. I said yes to everything. I did everything. I made no money. I ground every opportunity I could possibly do, and so when there was a opportunity that maybe there was a gap in my resume or in my, it got filled with, I've seen that person do stuff.
And that, I mean, that broke you into a pretty long run at Trek. You went through a bunch of different jobs there. Talk me through that experience, because you were there for over a decade, and moving to Wisconsin. I mean, I feel like that's another one of those, like I said yes to everything. I'm from Wisconsin originally, and I've got nothing but respect for someone who lived in Colorado and was like, you know what? I can live in Wisconsin, because that is a dramatic shift for anyone to make.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, you did say yes, and obviously you had an amazing run there. But talk me through that experience and sort of how that prepared you for more of the stuff in the future.
If there was a thread that follows my career, is at some point I started forecasting what I wanted to do. At some point in my, and I don't have a epiphany. Like I, the first time it happened, somebody had to remind me that it happened. So my very first day with the Subaru Gary Fisher team, I drove down to Golden. I met Scott Dobert, and Scott Dobert is a historical titan of race support, and also a world champion master cyclocross racer. And his wife, Mary Grigson, was a Subaru Gary Fisher athlete and an Olympian, and whatever. So I went there, and he was the team liaison, technical support for the U.S. Postal Team at the time. And I went there to learn about Bontrager hubs and new techniques to build wheels, because you used to have to build wheels. That was the thing. But I remember I'm in his little shed taking apart a DT Swiss 240 hub, which they still work the same way to this day, which is one of the enduring things in this industry. Um, and I was just like, I want your job someday. So fast forward, I don't know, it's 5 years later, I'm sitting at Trek doing source and stamp product management and sending people shoes to ride and trying to get helmets to pass testing and just trying to figure it out. And Scott shows up at my desk and says, "Do you still want my job?" And I
No
was like,
way.
"Yes, I do."
That's
Okay, well,
wild.
let's go take a trip, and I'll introduce you to Johan and the team, and we'll take it from there. I mean, that it makes sense in hindsight, right? Like you piece it together, it sounds like a fairy tale. Like when he said, "Do you still want my job?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" Yeah, he had to remind me that I said that, and that was like the continuous start of being thrown in the deep end, finding a way, and utilizing luck, relationships, and grit to kind of make a way. It was I got that job. I had moved to Wisconsin and started immediately traveling, 3 out of 4 weeks a month, going to everywhere and trying to handle, learning how I didn't even know anything about road racing, uh, and trying to learn everything there. And then days after that, the head of marketing at Trek was not there anymore. So I had a new job. I spent the most money. I did. I spent the most money in the company, and I had no boss. So the opportunity, out of sheer luck, that happened was John Berg, the CEO or president of Trek, started to have a relationship with me. And I had no business talking to John at that time. I'm 25 years old. I am just a grunt out there grinding it out. But because that was where all the money was going, on the sports marketing side, and because there was no other intermediary, it started a weekly John Burke meeting that lasted nearly 10 years. And I think that was the part that, having that coaching, having that connection, um, was lucky. And it led to, hey, when the guy who was in charge of road bikes left, I was like, well, I want to be in charge of road bikes. I don't know anything about being in charge of road bikes, but he's like, okay, we'll give that a try, And then when I took over road bikes, a little bit while later, I was like, well, I want to be in charge of the custom business. It's not going that well. I'm like, okay, let's give that a try. I didn't know anything about U.S. manufacturing or custom product or anything, and so just long run of luck in that arena with the grind. I did as much as I could whenever I could.
Yeah, like it seems like you've probably over delivered in all those roles and they expected you to do the same as they gave you this additional responsibility. It sounds like with John, you had this mentorship, I've got to imagine, along the way that probably helped you just gather more information or help you with your decision making or whatever. But you're talking about these roles like they were big stretches for you, and I'd be curious to know, like, what is your process when it comes to putting yourself in these situations to kind of close that gap? Is it all mentorship based? Are you a big reader? Like, what do you do? Or is it just straight up grinding away until you get the answer? Like, how do you kind of approach closing those gaps?
I wish that there was a magic formula that I could suggest. It's different in every scenario, right? So when I started as a mechanic for a professional team, I needed to learn how to be a bicycle optimizer, a bicycle fit person, a psychiatrist for a rider, international traveler and packer, and um, each one of those required a different tactic to figure out. And mostly, it is being aware of what, as much as you can. I think it's hubris to say I'm aware of what I don't know. As much as you can, be aware of what you don't know and focus your energy on finding the skills to close the gap. And it takes a grind, it takes mentorship, it takes, reading, it takes uh, planning, it takes mental health, focus. It depends on what it is. So in each role it was different. When I went to my very first big jump, um, there was a guy named Ian Moore who was the previous race mechanic. He taught me how to make a remote lockout from a spoke and a carbon piece and a rear lockout, because Manitou didn't have a remote lockout and RockShox did, and it was a must-have for athletes, right? Um, he taught me how to do the technical fitting. One of the things that you don't know about mechanics these days is mostly what they do is make sure the parts work, because they just swap them if they don't. They don't actually, there's not a lot of fixing. Mostly what they do is make sure the bike is optimized to the rider. And that's a very delicate, interaction. Uh, but then traveling the world, I went to Europe for my first time with maps. Like you
Like
have to go
physical printed out maps.
physical printed out maps. You have an address and a map like that. That was I don't know how I learned. I just had them. Like, there was no other way. It was had to happen. You had to get somewhere by 5 o'clock, and if it was 12 hours, you better leave at 3:30 in the morning, because you needed at least an hour to screw up.
Yep.
So um, I think that a little bit of systematically organizing the gaps in what you want to be and what you are is probably the most straightforward way. And it depends on what methodologies you subscribe to. I've tried bunches of them. People like the David Goggins method of, stick a sticky note on the window and say something really mean about your gaps because it's honest, and if you're mean about it, then maybe you'll do something about it. To an honest assessment of, your true qualities and how you bridge them to, where you want to be. Um, but methodology depends on the need.
You were at Trek for over a decade, and then you moved into, you were director of product for Road and Project One, which I believe is a custom bike thing. And then you took over POC, which is this, I think it's a Swedish brand, right?
Yes.
Helmets and protection and stuff like that. You got a chance to move out of Wisconsin to Park City, Utah, which is probably, as someone who came from Colorado, probably a pretty meaningful change. Talk to me about jumping into that role and kind of taking over a brand that was somewhat established. You had to deal you know, your previous role at Trek, you're in Wisconsin. You could go down the hallway to John Burke's office and ask him a question. Now you're working across countries, essentially, dealing with people in other countries, trying to continue growing this established brand. What was that transition like? I mean, it had to be just a completely separate set of things to learn really quickly.
There's an interlude there, so like it's actually a pretty important one. I didn't leave Trek to go to POC. That's not that like maybe looks like that on some level. I actually I had a statement that I wanted to run my own bike business, and I wanted to get there, and
Mhm.
I had a huge job when I was at Trek, and I continually was having the conversation about how do I how do I gain the skills that I need, that I know I need, that like look, I have these tasks, I read these books, like I have a gap in these skills, and I need practical experience if I'm ever going to get there. And there was always this difficulty of, well, you have this huge business here that does a huge value to the company, and you want to do this over here that's not as big of a job or not as big as business, and we could never get them to fit, right? And so eventually I said, I'm going to go get that experience here or not. So I resigned. I resigned without a bridge to swing to, or a branch to swing to. Um, I I resigned in January, and I stayed until July. Um, and I kept it silent for months because I care about John, and I care about, he's like my business dad. Like I really do care about him, and making him successful. And so I was getting to the point where my kids were about to go to school, and I was like, if I don't make a change now, I could do this for way too long. And
Yeah.
and I looked at somebody who I have a huge amount of respect for, but had been the head of mountain bike, the only head of mountain bike ever at Trek. Like, the job, you just doesn't it doesn't elicit change. Like, it's the top of the heap. It's the biggest bike company seller in the world. Like you don't leave. So so I made that choice with my wife and said, we're going to raise our kids in the mountains, and we're going to figure out how to scale acquisition so that we can do something different. So we moved to Steamboat Springs, Colorado.
Okay.
And I naively, very naively, thought all those people who told me, hey, if you ever need a job, give me a call. It's like, those people are going to call me. Like, I'm going to have, I'm going to have jobs all over the place. Um, and of course, that didn't happen, because there's got to be an opportunity for somebody who, even if they recognize your talent, they would they place you in it. And so I goofed off for a while. I rode the Breck Epic, super fit. But I also started to do a little bit of consulting, and learned a bit about that. And here's the inside tip on like, how do you get to that level. I I met Travis Campbell, who now owns Eagle Creek, and he used to be the president of Smartwool at that time. And he was so generous with his time with me, and he was like, you know, I know they say there's companies out there that just hire smart people and then figure out what to do with them. It's like, I don't have one of those companies. Like, I don't have an opportunity, whatever. And that struck me as deeply honest. And him and I have been friends ever since. And I can't believe he gave me the time of day at that time. But we went out fishing later that day, and he was asking me what I was doing to get a job, and I told him, and he was like, "You're not talking to recruiters? Like, what what are you doing? Like, oh, recruiters? No thanks, gross. Like, not having." He says, "Maybe, but the jobs you want, the companies can't afford internal HR. They're not posting those jobs. They're not looking through those channels. So, like, if you're not looking where the jobs are, you're not looking in the right place." So he introduced me to two people, um, and both of them have since changed my life. One of them was Adam Forrest, and he had the recruitment for the GM of POC Americas, and they were in the last 2 weeks of, like, making a decision, and he forced me into the uh, into the discussion. And I met Jonas Shorgren at OR in January of that year, and I started in February.
Wow.
So, yeah, so hot tip: how do you get there? Talk to recruiters. They help you. They actually are good people. The ones that are good, not the ones that try to make you pay for resume rewriting or things like that, but actually the ones that are genuinely looking out for companies, that are looking for cultural fits, that are paying attention to what their customers need. Um, don't shy away from that. Call as many as you can. Get as many working for you as you can.
That is a hot tip that we have not heard on this podcast yet. It makes so much sense though, because we all know that recruiters are certainly not cheap, especially these external ones. Like what a recruiter gets at, for a placement is pretty substantial. And if a brand is willing to work hard enough to hire somebody like that to bring the right talent to them, it's probably the right call to be in their Rolodex. So wait, so you met somebody else during that time? You said there was two people that have changed your life. So there was another person during that time that later in the story kind of comes back around.
I was introduced to there's another recruiting firm called the Noda Group, and they're like the big outdoor industry recruiters, and I was introduced to um, Roy, who is the Roy Nodowitz. But he's actually not the person who made a big difference. It was Sarah Spirko, who's the managing director of that group. And she probably doesn't actually know that she made a huge impact, but she made a huge impact on me because I turned down a job that she tried to get me to take that changed my life.
Her inbox is about to be very full. I mean, it's interesting to me because you wanted to, run your own bike brand, but effectively, like from the outside, you kind of were at Trek, director of product for, some of the biggest. I mean, you were already sort of doing it in my mind, but I guess the reality of what it looks like on paper versus your experience, did it just not feel like at Trek that you had full control, or you wanted to be like, I ran this thing from start to finish. You wanted to have more fingerprints on it. Like, how are you thinking about that mentally in that time?
I wasn't. I don't know. That's a good question, actually. Why did you want more? Um,
Hey,
you
there's
know,
nothing wrong with that, but I just think
yeah,
like you already had so much control. You didn't need to worry about some of the stuff that a lot of people starting from scratch have to worry about. So many of the other things were kind of handled that you could make the fun decisions at that point. What color should we make this Project One bike, or what special feature should we double down on? Where's our 95.5 on what we're gonna make special about this bike? Like that's the fun part, You got to skip over all the BS.
yeah. I think at the time it was like, well, I just want to grow. I had not yet met people who helped me understand that more is not better, better is better. And I think honestly, intently just wanted more, and not even specifically for any great rationale. Um, and uh, I definitely did. The Wisconsin was definitely part of the like, this has to be worth it sort
Yeah.
of thing,
Yep.
right? Like I don't want to say Wisconsin is why we left, but Wisconsin was continuously why we were evaluating whether we were in the best spot or not. Like everything else in life had to be really good because not Wisconsin's not bad. It's not our place. It's not it's not what we come to think of as home and lifestyle and stuff. So
Yeah.
I think pair those two things together, and that's really what made the decision. In hindsight, what I if I was like retelling the story, it was it's somewhere along the way. There's a recognition that I really was driven to make other people successful and to put more people on bikes. Like those, that's my mission. That's my mission statement in life. I had not formed that yet, and I wanted more ability to do that. And I wanted to be more connected to the people that I was trying to affect. And the product team, the business development team, the engineering team, industrial design is pretty far away from the person who walks in the bike shop and buys a bike and changes their life. And is pretty insulated from the difficulties that are there, is pretty insulated from uh, the the surprises that are there, the excitements that are there. And I wanted to get closer to that and have some, even if closer meant I had to do more, if I had to own more of it, I wanted to keep getting closer and closer to that actual connection point, the actual exchange that changes somebody's life.
I totally respect the also like the external factors of that decision as a parent of two younger kids thinking about what's the environment that I want my family to grow up in. How do I make sure that they stay outside all the time and get on two wheels or breathe fresh air? As someone who grew up in Wisconsin, there's a giant chunk of the year where you can't really ride bikes outside. Or, I guess you have to have a very special bike to be able to ride in that much snow. But I can understand why you make that decision. How did you work with that choice to join POC? Because now that you tell me about that interlude, did you feel like it was just sort of time to get back to work? Because you're talking about like getting more people on bikes, and surely, protective gear has a big part of that. But as someone who has kind of stated that they wanted to like really run and operate a bike brand, taking sort of like a detour in that sense into protective gear, how did you think about making that decision and in the moment and maybe in hindsight of that call?
That was one of my most clear moments, both in the moment and in hindsight. There were three major factors. There was, um, and I won't lie, the pressure of wanting to do something was one of them, right? Like I had planned to take a year off. I thought that's how long it would take. Um, by the time I was 4 months in, I was on I need to do something. Like this is, and was kind of having a struggle with that. You can only, I guess I can't only ride my bike so much, fish so much, ski so much. Like I want to be productive. I'm not really a leisurely person. It turns out. So I started to feel the tug. One, um, two was that it got to put two of my passions together. I still coach ski racing on the weekends for the Aspen ski team. My kids are ski racers, and I still engage in that community. But it brought skiing and cycling together for me. And then third was purely skill acquisition. Like I needed commercial experience. I needed sales experience. I needed operations, fulfillment, 3PL, door development, e-commerce or omni-channel connection, price protection. I needed fundamental, like basic commercial experience. And I was offered the keys to the castle. Like with a really cool brand. And
Yeah.
um, so it was it was always actually a means to an end. It was definitely even um, even discussed in the part of it. Like this is a 5 year skill acquisition for me, and it's on my way to run my own bike company. That's what I'm striving for.
I mean, how do you have that conversation in the moment? Because I feel like you're looking to acquire the skills that managing director needs to bring to the table. Like, did you just know enough to be dangerous, and then you knew that those skills were going to get better, or were they taking a flyer on you? I mean, the skills that you just
Yes,
listed off are sort of like what you need to be a managing director.
one of the things that's really difficult to forecast is perspective, right? Everybody has a different perspective. And I think that sometimes people with a much broader perspective than you have see that you have a much broader perspective than you understand. You haven't developed it yet, so to speak. Um, and I think that is what happened in this arena was there was a person who looked at me and listened to whatever I could or couldn't do and was like, maybe they don't have the direct technical skills or the direct application of what's going to happen, but they know what needs to happen in order to achieve the outcome. I don't have a better explanation for that. I don't, there's nobody, not one person that I've ever worked for was like, I hired you, didn't think you could do it, but gave you a chance. And this is why it worked out. Like, I don't,
Yeah.
I have had people say I hired you, didn't think you could do it, and look how it turned out, but not for any particular reason.
I mean, at this stage in your career, you were a known quantity. You'd held some pretty high level jobs already at one of the biggest bike companies in the world. It wasn't like you were coming in from the outside as, not having, like I said, you had plenty of skill and enough information to be dangerous, but also looking at it as a skill acquisition. That's like the conversation that I always advise people to skate away from in those discussions, because it's like, I would love to learn all the things that this role needs. I just find that really interesting in that, that was sort of your mindset going into it, but clearly you had enough information and enough experience to make that whole thing work. And you were there, you did the 5 years like you said you were going to do, and obviously learn what you needed to learn and develop everything. You probably also got some extra lessons, because looking at the timeline of 2018 to 2023, there was kind of a big global event that happened while you were at POC. Tell
Yeah.
me, tell me more about that. What was it like being a managing director of an outdoor business in the year 2020?
First, I'm going to go back to one thing you said though, is that I do think that I wouldn't shy away from telling somebody that you're looking for the skill acquisition for a job that it requires, if you can articulate the vision that you expect the job to perform.
Mm.
Saying, "Hey, I want to go here. I'm not quite sure how these building blocks are going to work yet." That there's a big difference than, "This is really interesting and you're going to teach me how to do my job."
Right.
Like,
Absolutely.
no, I'm gonna take it here. I don't know how, but I'll figure that part out.
Yeah, yeah, having
Big
your sort of
difference.
North Star going into it and selling the vision, and then also having that ability to connect the dots, like idea to execution. I can do that all day long. This is where I'm trying to go. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think to clarify, especially like going into it being like, I don't know how this is gonna work. I'm coming here for you to show me, is like absolutely not what I would recommend.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
we're simplifying a lot too, just keep it.
Yeah.
But yeah, tell me more about that. I mean, you had the vision, you knew where you wanted to go, but then you definitely got some stuff thrown your way that was out of everybody's control.
We had such a cool opportunity at that time. Puck was so small. Like, I mean, it's not public information, so I won't share. But it's so small. Like, people think the brand is so big, and it was so small, and it was 70% snow. Like, the business was overwhelmingly snow in the US and overwhelmingly ski race, which is like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the human population, right? And this amazing brand with this amazing brand notoriety that, yeah, has had some missteps that, like the product or otherwise, but was sitting there with this brand that was so much bigger than the business, so much bigger than the business. And so the task was how to make the business get to be the size of the brand, right? Like, and that's way easier than how do you give a brand cachet? How do you pull it together? How do you make it desirable? It was, how do you get somebody who wants it, the thing that they want, in the place that they want it, at the price that they want it, at the time that they want it. Like, it was very logistics focused there. Uh, and I think that when I started, it was also so difficult. Like, we 2 weeks or 3 weeks after I started, we went into factoring. Which, for anybody who doesn't know what that is that if you have receivables that you give a dealer, you say you have terms of 90 days or whatever, you don't have that cash. You're waiting for them to pay. If you factor your receivables, basically a bank says, well, as soon as you, or they're not a bank, it's a financing institution, as soon as you have those terms, you can pull up to 85% of the funds immediately. And that's how cash strapped we were. We were so cash strapped that we couldn't afford the terms that were required to do the business. And so it was like laser focus at that point. Like I came in, I didn't really know that much about the financial side of the business. A couple weeks later, we had to go into factoring. I signed this agreement to keep it going, and it was like just galvanizing to the point of, this is this is a reality of running this operation. We have to be so focused on connecting the product to the person in the most efficient manner, because we've got this cash situation that's really complicated. Um, and that led to a rebalancing of this year. it basically was like, well, we can't be 70% snow because the snow business is more arcane or yeah, I don't know, arcane is probably the right word than the cycling business. For those people who don't know, in the snow business, retailers order your product in February or March for the next year. You deliver that product somewhere between October and December, and then you don't get paid for it until February of the next year. So you have this cycle that that is really capital intensive on an annual basis. And because margins are slim, you can't really afford to invest to grow your business as fast as you want, and, et cetera, et cetera. Well, cycling happens to be on almost the exact opposite scale, or time scale. So you you take orders in September, you deliver product in March and April, you get paid in April and May, and so you add a cash cycle into your business. And I think I got a lot of credit for being a bike guy that developed a bike business at POC, but I actually was just trying to figure out how to make cash available for us to spin the flywheel.
Mhm.
And I had a really good partner in it, had an amazing partner to develop it. But that all of that happened, um, and we start to get the cycle. We've grown almost 100% from 2018 to 2020, and on March 12th, I proactively said, hey team, we're not going to be in the office for the foreseeable future, um, and and we're going to be okay, but we're gonna not be here for a while. Take your desks home, take your screens home, take your like. Have no idea what this means, but be ready to work. We'll talk on Monday. And I went to sleep on Friday with, I don't know, $900,000 in the factoring account, and I woke up Monday with no money in the factoring account.
Oh my God.
The risk for that financial institution, it's not a bank, so it's not a line of credit. It's not a secured, line of credit. It's a variable line of credit that is basically at their discretion, right? And they went, world shutting down. We're not putting out any more money. And I remember just feeling the weight of being in charge. And that weight is very different than the weight of being in charge of a paint color or a or a spec decision or whatever. And um, that lesson will stay with me for my whole life because I was not paralyzed, but I also wasn't going to do anything. I remember talking to the CFO and just saying, I'm just not going to do anything. I don't know why. This is not something you react to. I'm going to take some time. The world is way different today than it was yesterday. This is not one of those things that you just use your mental power on making a course correction when you don't even know where the course is yet. Like, I'm going to figure this out. So, over the course of 5 days, we figured out how to coax some liquidity out of our partner, which bless them, they saved us. I mean, they kept us in business. They did that. Then the government came out with the ability to get some loans to keep people employed, which was also one of those things. Was like, well, do we qualify? Do we not? Like, we're all in. Do it. Get it. Like, let's do everything we can. If we get rejected, whatever. We got a little bit of money out of that allowed us to keep employees, just with, again, on faith. Like, we're just not doing anything because if we truly react to the day, we just shut down. We just go, we default on everything, and business is over, right?
Mhm.
2 weeks goes by, and you know essential workers allowed to go back to work, so warehouse people can go back to work. And by 30 days later, it was raining orders. Like you could, I mean, by the end of March in 2020, or end of April, really in 2020, the business just went to an extreme. A lot of lessons in that time, but just in that 6 week period of time, so to speak, the world changed for the outdoor industry, and um, there were winners and losers, and I think that most of the winners were the ones that just kind of went, well, I'm just going to see what happens. We'll just wait. The people who laid off half their workforce 5 days later were like, wait a second, now we now what do we do? You know,
Yeah.
um, so I think that whole process was interesting because it totally different set of problems. Within 6 months, we were out of factoring. We had enough money to fund our own growth. We had more demand than we could deal with. We had, you know, uh, retailer expansion. We had to start managing our growth instead of trying to push for it. We started to have to go, well, who are we going to give product to, and how do we keep this straight? And it was a omni-channel business, so Amazon plus our own website plus retailers turns into, well, if you give it to Amazon, then retailers hate you. If you take it for yourself, then Amazon and retailers hate you. And like how do you? But the most profitable sales are obviously your own sales, and the customer wants to connect with you, and blah 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 blah. So we dealt with that for a really long time, and then in the spring of 2022, our warehouse was hit with a cyber attack,
Oh, no way.
completely shut down, lock and ransom, completely shut down.
Oh, that's
And
crazy.
February of 2022, peak of demand for cycling gear, peak of demand, for ski gear, and we were dead in the water. Just no motor, no oars, nothing. Couldn't send an order across. Couldn't get one processed. Couldn't get product received. Couldn't get product shipped. Um, and there's a whole nother lesson that came. Like the bottleneck of that. Then by the end of that being resolved, then money went from 3 to 7%, and the outdoor industry started to be oversupplied, and so um, very, very interesting journey through that time.
How do you deal with a cyber attack? Like, what do you even do in that scenario? I've never even considered what to do.
I'll never forget. We get a call from our partner there, and they say, "Hey, we'll be back online, tomorrow." We're like, "Okay, well, we miss a weekend. Do we miss? We had some big orders going out, but not that big of a deal." Then tomorrow's like, "Well, it's probably going to be the end of the week." So then you're like, "Okay, end of the week is a big deal. This is now a crisis, so to speak, but not the end of the world. Like we'll give some people some time off. We'll staff up for the weekend. We'll catch back up. Whatever, no big deal." Well, by 10 days in, I definitely went, we can't wait anymore. We can't sit here and do nothing. And we were selling tens of thousands of helmets at that time, and SKUs and other related goods. Like it was the biggest months in POC's history coming in to those months. Biggest order book, biggest season, whatever. And we don't have any systems. So we basically started doing it almost like it was a chalkboard, like one helmet in, one helmet out, one helmet in, one helmet out, and we relieved, or we pushed for the basically inventory management was going to be on a spreadsheet, and we just said we have to go, we have to fulfill orders, we have to start working on it. We shut down the website, said we can't take any more orders because we didn't we only could deal with so much things a day, and one helmet at a time versus 100 helmets at a time kind of made sense. We tried to connect with the most users as we could. Um, and there was a team of people that just grinded and grinded and grinded to try to make one shipment at a time. And I can say it wasn't successful. Like it was it was enough of a difficulty that it really changed the face of that business.
How do you even like wrap your head around having something like that come out of the blue and just completely derail so much effort and progress, and the emotional toll that would even take on you and the team, and not to mention the financial toll on the business and everything else. I can't even begin to imagine
There's not
that.
that many black swan events in this world, so you just have to believe that if you've lived through one, you probably won't have another one, and if you get two, you're really probably not going to have a third.
Fingers crossed. I mean, we've been really digging into your backstory, but really, I want to talk about Canyon because that's what you're doing right now. And there's a lot that we could continue digging through, but I think that's like another whole podcast worth of discussion. If you're okay with it, I want to just
Yeah,
hit the fast
absolutely.
forward button because just recently, I think, what, 4 months ago, you kind of assumed the GM role at Canyon Bikes for the Americas. Talk to me about this because this feels like, now you're in charge of a mega brand here and on a global scale. I mean, Canyon is doing something really special with not only the bikes but the people that are on the team and everything else that kind of goes into it. Does this satisfy for you, that idea of like, I want to be running a bike brand? Is this like, do you feel like you got it?
Not not only does it satisfy that it's the bike brand, it's the crown jewel in the mix these days. It's the brand that's doing something different, that has built some infrastructure that is durable for the future, that's weathered some difficult storms here, and has so much more opportunity. Such a great connection to riders, such a great understanding of what's happening with the ridership, and just cool. I mean, just a cool place to be. Cool people, cool outlook, and great products. It's really more than I could have hoped for.
What are the things that you're thinking about, kind of as you accept the role, say, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm in. What are you thinking about on the way into a job like this, on the drive to your first day of work in the Carlsbad office, for example? Like,
Hubris. I got this. No problem. I'm just kidding. I think, I think that one of the things that has always driven me is productive paranoia. And so actually that is, I'm not scared, I'm not paralyzed, but I actually have a brain that thinks about all of the things that could happen, and then I try to focus on the ones that I think are the most meaningful to avoiding worst case scenario and producing best case scenario. And so as we come into my first day at Canyon, I had a lot of background because I wanted it, needed it. The bike industry is tough, and I wanted to make sure. So I didn't come in blind, but I had spent a lot of time on the okay, what are all the things that could be there, and really categorize them, and then started digging in. There's a book that's called The First 90 Days. It is the idiot's guide to onboarding.
yep.
If you do like 20% of what that book says you should do, you're going to be way better off on it. And I've used it in every new job I've had. Um, and that like it was start there, really evaluate, listen, try to learn, try to build early wins, early coalitions. Really just start from let's not make it let's not make it Canyon one of the best bicycle companies in the world. Let's make it Canyon and the people in the door, and what are we trying to do to improve our ridership.
I'm actually surprised that's the first time that book has been recommended on this podcast because it is a really great read. It was actually handed to me when I started at Red Bull too. So yeah, I've read that book and it's fantastic in terms of giving you a structure of like how to land and make an impact right out of the gate, but also how to think about it and how to build it and how to assemble the right puzzle pieces to make sure that you're successful in that first 90 days, but then well beyond that as well. I think that's a great recommendation for just about anybody listening.
It's not one of those ethereal, get a feel for the culture. It's like do these things exactly.
Yeah.
Like, do this, and I love those
Here's your
types of
punch
books.
list. Go do these things and you'll be fine.
Yep.
It's helpful because I feel like a lot of the advice is more ethereal than that. I mean, let's talk about the bike industry because I mean, I've been in the bike industry for a while, and the last couple of years, I feel like the refrain every year is like, yeah, this year was rough, but next year it's going to pick up, and I've heard that for many years in a row at this stage. How do you feel about the bike industry at large? You know, is it doom and gloom? Is next year going to be the year? Like, what? Where are we at? What are you thinking?
You got to be real careful about what part of the bike industry you're talking about, because this is the world's best time for riders. Like, it's never been better. The product's never been better. The pricing's never been better. The infrastructure's never been better. The availability of service and support's never been better. Like, on and on and on and on. You go, well, myself as a bike rider is in a better position to ride bikes than virtually ever. Maybe in 1970, when kids rode bikes to school and people paid attention, you know, it was better. But the products were not very good at that point. You know, the inspiration wasn't very good. So I think that sometimes the business of bikes, the difficulty, the tariffs, the oversupply, the retail woes, it overshadows this reality that bike business is good. It's like, for the riders, it's really good. It's just harder than it used to be. Um, and it's been harder than it used to be for the last 7 years continuously. It just keeps being harder than it used to be. And some of the things that are apparent are people not really being willing to deal with reality, right? Like, I I remember in 2023, when it was doom and gloom, everybody was like, by next summer, it's going to be great. Everybody was group thinking, next summer is going to be great. And then July came, and it was the worst July in forever. And it got harder. And I think that some people default to well, I have to have optimism that it's going to get easier. But I default to, I have optimism that we are going to prevail and figure this out, no matter if it's hard or not. And so let's just prepare for it to be tough, because the ridership is there, the infrastructure is there, the demand for product is there. We just have to make sure that we are providing the right level of service and support and connection to that, to make sure we create enough value that the business is there.
It does seem like a pretty great time to be a bike rider, and I think there's a lot of people who still, you know, have been on the fence, and you know, like a lot of the people listening to this podcast are trail runners as well, and like I would encourage them, like, if you've been on the fence, now would be a really great time to pick up a bicycle because you're going to get insane technology, incredible spec, like all the bikes out there. There's not really like, oh, this bike has like a technical advantage over the other. They all are incredible bicycles at this point. Like everybody's kind of figured out that part. Is there anything that you want to see sort of like industry wide in terms of, you know, like us turning a corner, or something that you want to see everybody kind of adopt or adapt?
I mean, I think that the industry is still just really fractured. Would be the People for Bikes does an amazing job, lobbying on the Hill and bringing together, um, you know, players to push forward the advocacy side of the business. Um, but that's about as far as the industry collaborates. Like, it
Mhm.
pretty much stops there, and most of the rest of it is tough. And even deciding maybe what's the best way to supply bicycles is a industry problem that nobody really wants to. Well, everybody has their own idea. They want to protect their space and do that. So, I mean, I think that it's a tall ask to say let's have industry collaboration on supply, or I mean, it's also anti-competition and, monopolistic, and probably not legal in any path. So what I would really like to see the industry um, do, that I think is doable, is I think that the industry has to support its own infrastructure better, and it has to use its voice in the government better. The outdoor industry is notoriously bad at it, and bicycle is not as good at it as the outdoor industry. Of the amount of money that is spent on cycling and outdoor pursuits is massive. It's way bigger than cigarettes, but our voice is not heard at the same level. And part of that's probably okay because, are you willing to do the things that others are willing to do to lobby? My ethics say no, but part of it's not. Part of it's just not a great collaboration of and force of will to make big change or support infrastructure in a way that it can and should be.
That's a really great point. We had Erin Sprague, the head of Protect Our Winters, on the podcast a little while ago, and she was talking about this concept of the outdoor state being 100 million people. Like it would be the biggest state in the union if you put everybody together, and it spreads across ideology and politics and everything. Everybody cares about this outdoor state, and we saw it happen where everybody rallied around this against selling public lands, for example. Something that kind of strikes me as interesting. I just got back from the Outdoor Media Summit, and there were almost no bike people there. Like we were missing out on the wider outdoor grouping of so many of these conversations as cyclists. I don't think that we're showing up as many places as we potentially could. Although, to your point, like People for Bikes does a great job of sourcing a lot of data and research that probably does make its way into those wider conversations. But yeah, are we there in the level that we potentially could be? I was one of the few bike people at this outdoor media summit, and that's only one example of a big gathering of people that care about the outdoor industry, I guess. I wonder if we're there.
Yeah, we're not. I mean, I think, Aaron, we let's say, from a Canyon perspective, we've backed off on some things and we're going to lean back in, right? Like, yeah, like we have not been as good a member of People for Bikes as we should be. We haven't been as good a member of IMBA as we should be. We haven't been as good a member of NICA as we should be. And those are in our core advocacy, support, ridership, humans that we are deeply connected to, and we intend to support that further. How do I, as a person in the bike business, support OIA or other greater outdoor industry supports? It's still tough, right? Like the bike business and the outdoor business as a whole is a tight margin business, and what these companies really need is funding. They don't need me to say something. They need me to give them money so that they can further leverage that money into more money, so that there can be better infrastructure and um, and that's an interesting conundrum, right? Like, are our customers willing to pay more so that we can support them back into the infrastructure? And the outdoor industry hasn't figured out how to pool all the resources in an effective manner. You
Yeah.
know, you
Yeah.
think about all the different groups, whether it's POW and OIA and People for Bikes and Outdoor Alliance and Outdoor Conservancy, and it is a bit fractured, and I don't have an answer to that, but I think you know, we probably would be better off if we figured out how to bring it all together.
I mean, it's got to be tricky even from a brand side where, I think about all the different bikes and all the different categories that you exist in. And then I think about all the different teams and athletes that you support. How you manage to even work across that many groups of people so effectively is pretty staggering. And then, yeah, to like have the energy to look outside of that. I mean, I can understand why it hasn't become commonplace in our industry to look beyond because we're worried about road, we're worried about free ride, we're worried about cross country racing, about cycle. There's so many different things that you're already doing and already thinking about and trying to push the envelope that it is, I think, challenging. But it's a good note for all of us to be thinking beyond the sort of four walls of our cycling industry too.
Absolutely, and I think in some ways, Canyon's progressive in that manner, and we have some cool things to be excited about. Whether it's partnerships with LeBron James and his foundation to bring a whole different level of commitment to community and developing ridership, or it's some of our ambassadors that are doing alternate connections and support for their communities. And then, of course, we also play in the Fabio Whitmer and Matthew Vanderpool, and like we play hard in the endemic space as well.
Yeah.
But we are relatively robust in the alternate connections and development and planning for how do we have more in the outdoor space, more inclusion. But there's always more to do.
I'm really curious. What's it like to have LeBron James as a investor? I mean, do you does that factor into anything, or is it just like a cool footnote on the overall picture?
When you think about it on a day-to-day basis, it turns into just a part of who we are. But when you step back and you say, one of the greatest athletes of all time decides to put a substantial amount of their wealth into what you are living and breathing and working your life for, that is pretty awesome feeling. And not everybody knows how to articulate it, but you can feel it. Like, man, if he believes in us, that's like that guy's big time, right? It's just on a whole nother level, uh, you know. Um, so I think that it gives you confidence in a way that somebody. It's like when your parents believe in you that you can ride a bike. You're like, oh, I have no idea how to do this, but I'm going to figure it out. When somebody of that level of talent and reach and perspective and stardom believes in your company, it's genuinely a boost. And it's not believes in the company because we pay a bunch of money for him to say Canyon's cool. It's because he put his money into the company because he believes in what the company's capable of doing. So I think that that's humbling at some level and also inspiring. Um, and it also gives you kind of the athletic competition of you got to play hard. He's a guy who grinds it out to make his stardom, and he deserves us to do the same.
We usually end every episode of Second Nature with a segment called BPC, which is brand product content. It can be a brand you've discovered, a product you're using, or a piece of content that you love.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question in return. So you think about it while I give you my answer. All right.
Okay, all right.
This is a get to know you question, which is what is something that you want that you can afford that you just can't bring yourself to buy? So I'm going to tell you for almost almost 10 years, not quite 10 years, now 6 or 7 years, I wanted a beautiful fly rod that I could afford. They're $800 or whatever. But I had a fly rod that worked, and I'm not very good at fly fishing. And I had a very particular one that I wanted, and it was inspired by Travis Campbell, who I told you about. Um, he used to be the president of Fairbanks, and Fairbanks owns Sage. And last summer, I walked into a fly shop, and Sage X 5 weight 9 foot rod on sale, and I was just like, I'm gonna buy it, and I bought it, and I fish with my boys and alone, and it's the one place on earth that I find myself focused on just the task at hand. And every time I pick up that rod, I am thankful for the mentorship of Travis and how he helped me on my way, and also enjoy the solitude of nature and focus.
Wow. All right. That was really good. Now you've completely put me on the spot. I at least gave you a little heads up on BPC. I think one of the things that I've been trying to do a little bit more, and I'm trying to make my way there, is the idea of a vacation, which sounds so silly, but especially in my world of making content, I'm running a mountain bike YouTube channel and I've got this podcast and I'm consulting in between both of those two things. My brain is kind of like locked in at Mach 10 at all times. I'm thinking about content ideas for my stuff. I'm scheduling guests or writing newsletters for the podcast. I'm thinking about like how is this all going to work, because I let go of the side of the pool where there was a 401k and a weekly check to try to pursue this dream of doing all these things, but the part that most people don't see in this world of consulting and content creation is like you have to keep pushing all the time. And the idea of just letting everything sit for a week or two and go somewhere, and not only go somewhere, which anybody could buy a plane ticket to go there, but actually actively not think about it is a very, very challenging thing. And so I think for me, that thing is partially the plane ticket, but it's also partially the ability to let myself take a deep breath. And how do you buy that time for yourself? And how do you buy that comfort of knowing that when you come back after a window of time, that it's all still going to be there and it's going to be fine? I think that for me is sort of the dream. So um, I've been trying to incorporate this in my life the last 3 years. Around September, my wife and I have tried to take like a 3 or 4 day trip. Just kids stay at home with grandma, and we've the last 2 years gone to Iceland for a couple days, and you just like chill out for a minute, and that for me feels like absolute gift for my brain, for our relationship, for everything else. But to be in a beautiful place where I can't reach my laptop or my phone for an hour because I'm in a hot spring is probably like the best gift I can give myself, and trying to create the opportunities where I don't have to always be like, locked in at Mach 10. I don't know. That is for me the biggest gift.
All right, so I will encourage you in the form of education. I just read The Science of Scaling, and it has changed my view substantially, and it's worth a read about focus and about how to grow and what types of methodologies you might have available to you. And one of them is the one where you have to take a break.
Yep, this is exactly. I'm such a book nerd, so like that's going right in the queue. That's coming up next. I actually just
Great.
finished Unreasonable Hospitality, which I feel like is actually it's a book from the restaurant industry, but it talks so much about being a manager and giving clear feedback and thinking about how to over deliver on stuff. And there's so many interesting lessons baked into that book that I feel like transcend the hospitality world. But this one is next on my list officially. This is
Awesome.
great. All right, I'm gonna end my BPC. I'm gonna share kind of a fun one. There's a film coming out very soon called Mountains of the Moon. Chris Benchler he's made like a lot of ski films. He made this one which most people are familiar with, where they put these light suits and they film skiing in powder at night. And it was just like incredible as a video segment in one of his bigger films. Mountains of the Moon is coming out pretty soon, and there's a mountain bike segment in it. And my buddy Carson Storch is in there. They're riding mountain bikes with these light suits on at night, and it just looks crazy. So, for all of us that want to see something a little bit different and who miss seeing full feature length mountain bike films, this isn't a feature length mountain bike film, but there's a nice segment in the middle of it that's going to have that. So, I'm actually really
Cool.
excited to see that one. So,
Look forward to it.
well, Ben, thank you so much for being on Second Nature. This is such a fun conversation, and we skipped over a lot that I think would have been really useful. So we're gonna have to bring you back at some point to fill in some more. But congratulations on this new-ish role at Canyon, and I'm just so interested and excited to see where it all goes. And yeah, wish you continued success, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. If there's anything I can do for you, please let me know.
Right on.